Thank you for agreeing to do this.
Well, it's nice to be here. Well, in a way, it's not really, because Arthur isn't around anymore. But the film would have happened anyway.
You remember where you were when you learned that he'd passed away?
Yes, I was in an airport. I was in, I think, Heathrow, and the news trickled through, and it was very dazing, because I just thought, here are the Dolls coming back again in a fantastic way, and it would just seem to be part of their just constant bad luck. That was the first thing I thought of. I mean, it was just absolutely terrible, and I just thought it was so sad, because there seemed to be so much ahead for them. And I just thought, well, this must be the most unluckiest group in the entire history of the world. Every time something's going to happen for them, something good, some tragedy occurs.
Do you think, and you may have already answered this, but is it a blessing or a tragedy that Arthur passed away when he did?
Well, I think, and this might sound very hard, but in a way it's a blessing. In a strange way, it's a blessing, because I don't think he was a terribly happy person, and I think he'd lived for years in complete turmoil. And the final few weeks of his life had been fantastic, but the previous 30 years had been extreme limbo. And there was so much pain in his eyes, and I don't think he really enjoyed his life. So we must assume that perhaps he's happier now.
He told me that he learned by an email from a friend and then a couple of fans that his band was going to be reuniting.
Yes.
He called an old number that he had for you that he wasn't even sure was going to work.
Mm.
Do you remember that conversation? Can you remember?
Well, a bit before that, I had actually known Arthur, because he lived very nearby me on a road called Larrabee, and I had heard maybe 6 or 7 years ago around town that he was trying to locate me. But I never really trusted the people who were telling me, and I never had a phone number for him. But we did meet eventually a few times, and he was very, very sad and very, very embittered about the way his life had turned out. He had never earned money from the Dolls, and the Dolls had always been completely rejected by the mainstream. Yet anybody who remotely imitated the Dolls were having millions of dollars thrown at them, and Arthur had never earned anything at all. So I think that was very difficult for him to live with, and rightly so.
Some people who will see this film will find it hard to believe that a band, and we sort of tell their story, and there's a number of artists who come and name them as an influence and how important they were. Why is it that so few people have heard of them?
Well, I think all the right people have, and all the people who have heard of them and really given them time and listened to them absolutely love them and feel very passionately about them. And they only made 2 studio albums, and for a group who did so little really and existed for such a short amount of time, their impact has been extraordinary. But because they were connected with drugs and absurdly transgender issues, which at the time, you have to remember, it was a long time ago, and all of that kind of thing was really taboo. And if a man walked down the street wearing women's clothes, he could be arrested and thrown into jail. It isn't like that now, but I think people never forgot the Dolls, and they influenced so many people, and unfortunately they were ahead of their time, and also unfortunately I don't think anybody on a personal level, record companies, managers, whoever, cared about them and looked after them.
Can you explain that?
Well, I think it's a common story. I don't think musicians are protected really.
But some of them make a considerable amount more money than they did.
Yeah, they do. Most people do.
Why not the Dolls?
Because they were extremely unfortunate, very, very unfortunate, and they were ahead of their time. and that's the price you have to pay. And then, of course, all those dreadful American hair bands who came along in the 80s, who had no originality, had nothing to offer, and would instantly sell 20 million. So for people like Arthur, it was baffling, absolutely baffling. But often, I think people can't take the real thing. They can't take reality, and they would much rather have something that is less real.
Hearing you put it like that, I'm imagining how difficult that must have been for Arthur to be watching MTV or reading magazines in the 80s when he had nothing, and all of these bands who were influenced by him,
yes,
minus the originality, are cashing in.
Yes, but it does happen to lots of people, I think. But the Dolls are a perfect example of how a group can be shortchanged just by not bad timing, because when they were around they were so precious, but the world wasn't ready. It seems to take the pop world 30 years to understand anybody, to really understand a group or an artist, and often it takes deaths within the group, and then people say, ah yes, we do like those people now that they're not here. But the majority opinion where pop music is concerned is always silly and always wrong and always very, very slow. So it just takes a hell of a long time.
Do you remember where you were when you first saw the Dolls, first encountered them?
Yes, I had gone to see them. I had gone to see them live in '72, but their drummer had died 3 days earlier, and so even though I was on the front row and it hadn't been announced, this is, of course, is pre-internet days when news travelled very, very slowly, and everybody was expecting the Dolls to walk on the stage, and of course they didn't. There was just suddenly an announcement that Billy had died, and everybody just collapsed. And then the next encounter was television, and they appeared very famously on the Old Grey Whistle Test, which in those very dark days of '73 was a fantastic vision. And people, once again, people forget how absolutely dank things were, how dank life was and pop art was. And there was no sense of danger within pop music at all. So here were boys who were calling themselves dolls, and they looked like prostitutes, male prostitutes, and it was extraordinary. And the music, because it was such fantastic pop music, it just seemed to me like the absolute answer to everything. But of course, too dangerous.
Who died in that band and when?
Well, the first person who died was Billy Mercier, and that was in 1972. He died in London. And since then, the replacement drummer, Jerry Nolan, has died. Johnny Thunders obviously has died. And now Arthur has gone. So there's only David and Sylvain from the original lineup who remain, which is extraordinary. I mean, this is a blighted band. It really is, absolutely blighted. I'd almost say cursed, because if you listen to the music they made, every single song is really a hit single, and there's no reason on earth why it shouldn't have happened. But for some strange reason, this group has always been cursed.
Arthur told me that you believed if there was ever going to be a hit single from the band, he felt that, or he got the impression that you thought Trash was their best.
Yes.
Why Trash?
Well, because I think it summed them up completely. It was so immediate, and it was so it was just completely chock-a-block with every conceivable hook, and such a fantastic splurge of youth and energy, and has never, for an hour, for a second, for a minute, it has never dated. And that's the test of fantastic music. I mean, obviously we still listen to classical music from 7 million years ago, and I think the same thing will happen with pop music. The best of it will be timeless forever. And the New York Dolls are absolutely a part of that.
Can you describe to me back when you first see the Dolls on the Old Grey Whistle test, you become a fan, and not just any fan, but you become, as I've read, a charter member of their fan club.
Well, I tried. I mean, that was never really quite true, but I was obsessive. I was ridiculously obsessive. This was the band for me. This was the turning point for me. And I was 13, and it was the right time. And for everybody, there's an artist that catches you just at the right time, an artist or a group, and you never let them go, and they can never disappoint you. And the Dolls were that for me. I just saw them and I thought, this is it. This is how it should be. And I remain loyal to them. And I'm very thankful, very thankful.
Flash forward 30 years.
Greg, sorry to interrupt. We have about 5 more minutes, then I got to take you to sound check.
Oh, good, good. For those of us who don't understand, would you explain what the Meltdown Festival is, how you became involved?
Well, the Meltdown Festival is an annual festival in England, and it's one person is appointed, if you like, the caretaker of the event. And this year it was me, and I was allowed to compile the bill for almost 10 days of any artists who are obviously willing to take part. From every strand of art. And so within pop music, obviously, for me to try to get to David Johansen, who was the key to bringing the Doll name back, was top of the list.
Describe that conversation, David?
Yeah, the conversation was, I had met David previously, and I had known that historically he would always just simply pull the shutters down at the mention of the Dolls, because it was the past. Maybe he was embittered by the fact that he'd never made the money. He'd inspired many people and never made the money himself. Get royalty checks, even though Dolls album now somewhere stocked a major record shop. So I expected David to laugh at me, to put the phone down, and but he was very agreeable, and it just seemed like now was the right time. And he said, yes, they are great songs. And I said, yes, and that's the reason why you should sing them, and that's the reason why people still want to hear them. And so when the Reformation occurred in London and they walked on the stage, it was the love was just unbelievable. I mean, for me, it was just a jaw-dropping moment.
It was to me too,
yeah.
And I was surprised.
Yeah.
Were you?
Everybody was, because you fear the absolute worst in these events, and you're convinced that it can only be disappointing, and the past is the past, and it's a long time ago, and whoever made that great music is now going to look silly because their lives have changed and they're out of touch. Astonishingly, everything within that night, the Dolls, David Sylvain and I, just so fantastic. They did it absolutely right, and everybody was just gassed, and it was a beautiful moment. And Arthur played fantastically, and I went to him later and I said, absolutely fantastic playing. And his eyes were welling, because I think some part of him felt that he might make a few major boo-boos, shall we say. But no, it was just so wonderful, so wonderful. And it wasn't cabaret, it wasn't even nostalgia, which was amazing. It was just so right.
You said you recounted some moments when you saw on stage a look in his eye. Would you mind recounting that?
Well, he had extreme humility. He really did, and he obviously was a very, very gentle person and a very fragile person. Yet here he is connected to one of the most raucous, notorious rock and roll bands in musical history. Yet he was very, very fragile, and I don't think he ever really believed that he would ever be standing on a stage playing those songs again with David Sylvain. And I just, watching him throughout the night, I could see a sense of bewilderment, sadness and joy. Everything was in his face. I think he was just praying throughout the night, praying with thanks to somebody whom he now believed in. He was just so grateful. And the life must end, as Arthur's did. It was a beautiful way to go.
Do you remember what you told him when he first reached you on the phone?
He was so full of doubt. Could it possibly be? David really wants to do it. Play those songs. We're going to be together. We're going to rehearse. I'm going to go to New York and rehearse with him. I said, Arthur, people love the Dolls and they want it to happen, and it's going to be absolutely wonderful. And of course he was shrouded in doubt because of the humility and the years in the wilderness that he'd spent. I mean, but
You probably, do you have a time that you want to tell me? I don't want to make sure I'm keeping you.
I should want to check, see how much it's got. If you want to radio in.
I have, I came with Arthur when we first decided we were going to make this film, and he said, you know, to tell you the truth, I've got these passes to Morrissey, he's in town. And it was back in April, I think late April, early May.
yes, yes.
We walked in, and he was nervous. We picked him up, and because my wife had something she was going on, we were late. But we were driving in, and he was nervous. And he told me later that over the years, he used to be kind of a big deal when he would show up to shows, and that dwindled over time. And I think he was somewhat apprehensive of how this would go. You were gracious enough to give him some passes. As we walked in, right as we walked in, and I don't know how you did it, but you guys started Subway Train. That literally was the first song that came out, and I'll never forget the look on his face. The foresight you must have had to invite him to play that concert when you did changed his life.
Well, it's just, I think it's the expression of somebody who doesn't realize how much they're loved. And when people called his name that night from the stage, which they repeatedly did, shouted his name, I don't think he could quite believe it.
I know that he did, that's right.
Yes, yes.
Final thought, because I need you on stage now.
You have pretty much, I've got a note from Seth. Oh, did you know that Arthur was sick?
No, I didn't know at all. I knew he had certain ailments, but not that he was sick, no.
Do you know any other bands, just right offhand, from that old Grey Whistle test back in those days, what bands that you know of immediately that were influenced?
Well, there's so many. I mean, obviously, all of the key groups in the British punk scene, like the Sex Pistols, the Clash, the Damned, Generation X, the list is absolutely endless. The Pretenders, the list is astonishing. But then there's also the soft metal or heavy metal Motley Crues and people like Poison and Cinderella and groups that I don't know too much about them, but the list goes on forever.
Is there anything that you'd like to say about Arthur, even if it relates to his passing, before we wrap up?
He was a terribly sweet person. He really was, and I don't think he quite realised how much of a vital part he was of the Dolls, and how much the Dolls mattered to so many people, because they are loved, and he's a part of that, and he will be forever, and death doesn't alter anything.
For you to look and see one who is real. feels like. 3 words could change my life. So once, just for once, let the night pass with ease. Treat me like a human being. I'd like to know how this feels. 3 words could change my life, yet you treat me like you never cared. Although 3 words could change my life, you still treat me like you never cared.